Hey guys, so today I'm going to be bringing you a different kind of video. So just like last year, I collaborated with my dear friend Claire and we did a gift guide for books for Christmas. And we're doing it again, but this time it's different. This time it's for beginner readers. This doesn't have to necessarily be for gifts. This could be for anyone who is a beginner reader of any age. So what we did, we just picked a bunch of books that we generally like and we feel are good for beginner readers. And that's pretty much it. Now Claire is doing contemporary and classics. She's doing a blog post about it, which I will link in the description, so I highly recommend you check that out, because she'll be covering contemporary and classics. I'll be covering fantasy because that is where I mainly read, but it'll be a broad spectrum of fantasy, so I'll be going over urban fantasy, high fantasy, and just like general fantasy and just, you know, things like that. And all of the books that I'm choosing are just on a broad spectrum. Anyone can read them. You know, you don't have to be a certain age to read a book, but I will put out the ages of when I read the books just to give you an idea. So first off, I'm going to start off with urban fantasy, and if you're unfamiliar with urban fantasy, it's basically just hidden worlds. Like, it's set in our world, but there's a hidden magical aspect to it that we don't know about. Harry Potter is technically an urban fantasy, but it's more classed as children's fantasy. Percy Jackson is an urban fantasy. The Shadowhunter books are urban fantasy as well. That sort of thing. So the books that I picked out for urban fantasy is Coraline by Neil Gaiman and The Alchemist by Michael Scott. I'll be going over each book very briefly. I'll be linking them all in the description so you can look them up later. And yeah, so anyways, I'm going to start off with Coraline. It's written by Neil Gaiman. I picked this up for my university course that I did, which was children's fantasy literature. I'd never read it before, obviously, but I really enjoyed it. It's a children's book. This version has images in it, but it's a very quick and easy read. And if you're a beginner reader, this is very, very easy. You can read this easily in a day. Not even that. It probably won't even take you that long to read it. So Coraline is about a young girl who moves into a house with her parents. Now this house is a shared apartment house, like other people live there as well. And she finds this door that opens up to a brick wall and she's very interested in it, and she basically finds another world there, but this world is a parallel to her world. It looks exactly the same, but there's a evil dark twist to it. The inhabitants there have buttons for eyes and it's just a little bit creepy. She has another mother and another father that live there that want Coraline to live with them forever. And yeah, it's a bit creepy and it's a bit weird, but it's really good. It's a very fast read, it's very short. It's also a bit sinister. This is a very good book if you're a beginner reader, if you're a younger reader as well, and you just want something a little bit different, something a little bit new. I suggest Coraline. So if you know anyone who is a younger reader and they're not reading, or they just don't like what they're reading, I suggest Coraline. This is the other book that I'll be talking about, The Secrets of the Immortal, Nicholas Flamel. This is book 1, The Alchemist. I read these books when I was pre-teens to teenager, and these books were my jam. So I'm going to read the blurb of the book just to give you an idea what it is about, and yeah. The truth. Nicholas Flamel was born in Paris on 28th of September 1330. Nearly 700 years later, he is acknowledged as the greatest alchemist of his day. It is said that he discovered the secret of eternal life. The records show that he died in 1418, but his tomb is empty. The legend. Nicholas Flamel lives, but only because he has been making the elixir of life for centuries. The secret of eternal life is hidden within the powerful book he protects, the Book of Abraham the Mage. In the wrong hands, it will destroy the world. That's exactly what Dr. John Dee plans to do when he steals it. Humankind won't know what's happening until it's too late. And if the prophecy is right, Sophie and Josh Newman are the only ones with the power to save the world as we know it. Sometimes legends are true, and Sophie and Josh are about to find themselves in the middle of the greatest legend of all time. So if the blurb didn't hook you in there, I don't know what will. Basically, yes, this book follows Sophie and Josh Newman, two twins who are prophesied of being the saviors of the world, basically. And Nicholas Flamel is the one who's going to help them get to there. And if you'll notice Dr. John Dee in the blurb, he is a historical figure in the Elizabethan times. This book has a lot of historical figures in them, as well as mythological creatures and gods and goddesses. In this world, they all come from a place called Danu Talis, which is basically Atlantis. And when Atlantis fell, they moved off into other realms and all this stuff. And Earth is in a realm, but it's the most desirable realm, and the old gods want it as their own, because there's many generations of gods. You've got the first ones, who are very, very ancient and old, the ones after them, and they're called like second generations and third generations. So I believe second generations, and I believe is like creatures like vampires and things like that, and then people like Nicholas Flamel, immortals, are historical figures who are immortal. And the only way to become an immortal person is if you need help by a god or a higher ranking generation. But Nicholas Flamel did a little tricksy trick, and he created the idea for immortal life, whereas other immortals need help. So he's not really liked by other gods out there. So that's basically what it follows. I really enjoyed these books when I was younger, and I definitely need to reread them. There's 5 in the series. The first book, however, is quite small. It wouldn't take you long to read it. It's multiple perspectives as well, so you're not stuck with the same character. It's just very good. It's really rich in historical figures, in mythological figures, and magic and all that fun stuff. Again, I'm going to link every book in the description, so if you really want to, you can look this up. This book I'd class as any age. My mum read these when I was reading them, and she really enjoyed them. I still love them to this day. These were books that just really made me happy, because I was into historical things and mythology, so this was just, it connected all of that. So if you're very interested, please check this out. I highly recommend this for a beginner reader of any age, but more so probably a little bit older than a child, but you could give it a go. So another book I'm going to be talking about, this is just general fantasy now, is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. There's only 2 books in the series. It's a duology, so if you don't like the first one, that's cool. Or if you're worried about reading a big long series, that's okay. There's only 2 books. So this book follows 6 characters who are tasked with breaking into a military stronghold and retrieving a prisoner for a lot of money. All the main characters are like thieves and assassins and all that, so it's really fun. And yeah, it's fantasy. It's not urban fantasy. It's set in another world, which is quite similar to our world. They have a lot of similarities to Russia and Sweden, or like Scandinavia, stuff like that. I really recommend this to any beginner reader. 1, because it's different. Especially if you're a beginner reader in fantasy, this is a different type of fantasy, because it isn't your stereotypical fantasy of like knights and warriors and things like that. They're a bunch of thieves who are doing this job because they want money, but the characters are so fun and enjoyable, and it's just great. The author really knows how to write really good characters. The plot is also really good as well. It's very interesting. I highly recommend this. I have talked about this book on my channel before, so if you want to know more about it, you can go into that video. And yeah, so that is Six of Crows. Now we're getting into high fantasy. And high fantasy is generally high fantasy, big world building fantasy. That's how I class high fantasy as, just like a whole nother world that the author has created. So for this, I'll be talking about 2 books, Elantris by Brandon Sanderson and Magyk by Angie Sage. I'll talk about this one first. So this is Septimus, Book 1, Magyk. I read these when I was a wee child, not that young though. If you're a younger reader, I highly suggest this book, especially if you like Harry Potter. I highly suggest this. So I'll give you a little details of what this book is about. The 7th son of a 7th son was stolen and presumed dead as a baby. The father of that family discovers another baby in the snow who has violet eyes, and then he raises her as his own child. Sometime later, they find out that she's a princess and they have to protect her because her mother, who was the queen, was murdered. And also the mystery of what happened to Septimus Heap? Was he dead, or is he still alive? Who knows? But this book is really great. I remember I had a very happy time reading this. It has wizards, witches, magic. It's set in like a medieval fantasy world, which is always fun. It's definitely for younger readers. I feel like around about 10 years up to 15, I would recommend these books for. So if you have a child, or you know someone who is a beginner reader, or they want to get into fantasy, I really recommend this. It's a very delightful book. They'll really enjoy it. It's multiple perspectives as well. It's a very rich and fun magical world. If you're into fantasy and if you like magic and wizards and witches, you will like this book. So yes, I highly recommend it to any young beginner reader as well as older beginner readers, but more so for younger children. And then Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I've talked about this book before on this channel as well, so if you want, you can look that up. I think I talked about this book. You know what? I'm not sure. Anyways, Elantris is a standalone book, which is why I'm recommending it for beginner readers, because there's no series. It's by itself. You read it, you're done. Now, I do recommend this for older beginner readers because it is an older book. Not saying that there's adult things in it, but it's just a bit more advanced in the terms of writing style. Brandon Sanderson is really known for writing crazy and amazing fantasy books, and this is no exception. This is actually his first book he ever published, and it is so good. Like, when I found out that this was his first book he published, I was amazed because it's so darn good. It is so good. So this book follows 3 characters, and it is based around the city called Elantris, which used to be a city of amazing people and amazing beings, but then something happened and the people in the city started to rot and the city crumbled away. And now people themselves can become Elantrians because there's this magic that allows anyone to become an Elantrian, and then they go to Elantris to live there. But now that magic still happens, but instead of becoming this godlike being, you become this rotted thing that feels pain all the time, and you go to Elantris. So it follows 3 characters. One character wants to learn what happened to the city of Elantris. Another one is about politics. They come from a neighboring kingdom and they are there politics wise, and another one is about religion. So like I said, more for adult readers. It is around 600 pages, but it's a very good book. So yes, I recommend this to any older reader who's either getting into fantasy or you're a beginner reader yourself. So yeah. And the last book I'm going to talk about doesn't really have its genre, it's just here, but I'm just going to talk about it because I think it's a really good book for beginner readers of any ages, and that is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. The reason why I'm recommending this because it's basically just filled with short stories, and short stories are always good for beginner readers because they're short stories. It doesn't take you long to read them. You can read 2 pages and you're done with a story, pick it up some other time, and you're in another story and another adventure. And that's why short story books are good. Now this one, of course, it's Norse mythology. It's basically about all of the important Norse mythology stories that has happened in lore and in history in somewhat chronological order. It starts off with the beginning of how the Norse world was created in their mythology, and it ends with Ragnarok, the end of the world. I really enjoyed this book because 1, I like Norse mythology, and I'm into that sort of stuff, and like I said, it's a very quick, easy read. You can pick it up, read a few stories, put it down, come back to it. I think it'd be a really good idea for beginner readers, and because it's historical and mythological, it's not boring. Neil Gaiman really knows how to make it sound like a story and not like facts being thrown at you. Like, he makes it his own. He makes it very fun to read. So I really recommend this book to any beginner reader. I don't think age is an issue here with this one. I mean, if you know anyone who's interested in mythology or whatever, this book would be for them. So that's it. I hope you all enjoyed this. Again, I'll be listing every book in the description, and I'll also be linking Claire's blog post in the description as well, so please check hers out. I hope you like this video, and again, these books aren't necessarily just gift ideas, they also can be just ideas if you either want to get into reading fantasy or into reading, or you know someone who's not into reading and you want to give them a book, you know. If you're interested, please give these books a little look at. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, and I shall see you all again soon. Goodbye!